All right.
Let's do it.
Hello, Andres.
Juhani.
Glad to have you here. Taking the time on a Monday morning.
Yeah.
Being busy with all things, but this is something that I've always liked with you to have these discussions.
Yeah.
And today going a bit deeper into lifelong learning and adult education and maturing as well, where you're, I'd say, a very highly skilled expert.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll take it.
So maybe you can tell a bit about who you are.
Yeah.
Maybe something where you've been and where you are at the moment.
Right. Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. Okay, so I'll just kind of do a brief whirlwind tour of my life. I'll try to keep it brief.
Yeah.
If I go over, feel free to just be as rude as you want to be and just stop me. We connect with each other on that level. Okay, so I'm originally from Spain, but my family moved to the U.S. when I was very young. So I grew up in the U.S. I did all my schooling there. I was in the military for 3 years, U.S. Air Force. And my first career was business, and I worked in the business world for several years until I quit, because it just wasn't aligned. What I was doing at the time wasn't aligned with my values, especially the way we treated people. I was in a surprisingly quite a senior managerial role. I was young, but I was still. It was a small company, and the way I was treating people wasn't aligned with my own values, my own emerging values. I didn't have them yet, but I could kind of sense them emerging, and I said, something's not quite right. So I changed careers, and I ended up at Harvard University of all places to study psychology, and that's where I met the person who eventually became my thesis advisor, Robert Keegan. And you know about him. He's a psychologist, professor emeritus at Harvard, who has, he's one of the most preeminent researchers and theorists in this idea that the human mind goes through stages of maturity. But there are also ways in which most of us do not go through all of them. Right, that we don't have the right inputs in society, or we may not have the right conditions to help us mature further, particularly in adulthood. So, I kind of often think of think of ways in this field. People who work in this field think of ways in which adults can activate these latent, dormant kind of capacities in themselves to grow, beyond the default or expected stage of maturity that society boosts us up to. All right. Okay, so that's the education piece, and then finally the career. What am I doing now? I work as a organizational culture consultant. So I go into companies, large companies, and try to quickly understand ways in which people can essentially treat each other better in order to increase their everything, their trust, their effectiveness, their engagement, their satisfaction, their motivation, all of that is part of this one thing we call performance, or that contributes to performance of the organization. So, but it's a mix of all these different dynamics. So that's what I work on now. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Maybe want to continue a bit from what you're doing at the moment, so kind of the framework. So you work with a bigger company as a consultant there.
That's right.
But then you've started your own
I have.
Own brand or own
That's
company.
right.
So
That's
maybe a couple of words about that as well.
Yeah, sure. I was I left it out just because it's in the early stages, but
Mm-hmm.
but let's
just maybe do you see there some difference in on how you want to approach things and what you want to do
Right.
on your own.
Absolutely, absolutely. So listen, let me see if I can. This probably be the first time I articulate this, but so I've been working in the field of culture consulting for several years, over 6 years now, and I've developed a strong understanding of how these types of companies work, these consulting companies. There's a human element that's often left out. Clients sometimes notice this. They may intuitively pick it up, and sometimes it comes across in the feedback that it's missing, kind of a human element. And a lot of the people, not everyone, but I think quite a lot of the people who work in the culture field in business, they come from business backgrounds, and fewer, but there are some, but fewer, I think, have developed a deeper psychological understanding, which I think is necessary, because you're working with human beings, you're working with interpersonal dynamics, and they're deeply human, they're deeply basic and fundamental in some way, and the issue with them being so fundamental is that if you don't focus on them, if you don't get those fundamental pieces right, then you can predict there to be, other problems in the future, because those fundamental pieces aren't addressed. So that's why the psychological understanding, I think, is really important there. Anyways, so my range of services, my consulting company, I'm calling it Back to Human, and I'm developing a model of essentially the 4 core human drives that I argue need to be in balance. And once these are in balance, we all have them within ourselves. We have different drives, different motivations, and once these are in balance, I argue that they create the proper optimal conditions for growth, for our own evolution, our own development. And if we're to, put that into the environment of an organization, I think it can do a lot of good. And there are I'm not the first one to think at this level, but the model that I'm developing now, I think will be quite, different than what I've seen.
I'm really intrigued to know the 4.
Do you want to go into it now?
Briefly, it would be nice to at least name those, and maybe
sure.
I don't know how deep is that to explain why these 4.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's. Okay. We could spend a few interviews doing that, but I can tell you just to kind of, whet your appetite. But okay, so and it's complex because it's multi-layered. So you have what I'm calling the interpersonal drives. They're the ones that we practice, that we exercise, and that we activate interpersonally with another person, right? And because when you're by yourself, it feels very different than when you're with someone else. Different drives are activated, different experiences are activated. So, for instance, when we're with someone else, one of the drives is towards connection, towards building connection. So we need to activate that drive. If we don't develop that connection with others, then the relationship can never really flourish. We need to build connection, and there's a lot that goes into that. And the other side of that, I'm calling honesty, or truth telling. So being able to speak, about just kind of the reality, without holding back much, without kind of hiding. So these interpersonal drives they need to be in balance. If there's one that's that has too much emphasis, there's going to be some kind of deficiency. If you care or you connect with someone too much, but you're not honest with them, problems in the relationship will persist. But if you're too honest and there's no connection, then the relationship can't really deepen, can't really flourish. The trust breaks down. So these have to be both present. Those are the interpersonal ones, and then there's the intrapersonal ones, so within the individual. And the first one is growth, or you could call it awareness, developing ourselves. So when you think of self-improvement, self-mastery, challenging ourselves, that's one of the drives that helps us grow, and that's supported by its opposite, which is selflessness. It's about giving ourselves away. It's about generosity. It's about the sharing of ideas, the sharing of power. It's about letting go. So one is about building yourself up, and the other one's about letting go. There's a paradox, just like with the connection and truth telling. It's paradoxical, but both need to be present. We can go much deeper into the dynamics.
I like this.
I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
And just want to ask, are these very core things to, let's say, all individuals, no matter what you're doing, in what kind of field you are, and are these things also that can be sort of measured or be focused on an organizational level? So when you think about the organizational culture, then are these the very core things that you see important to be in place or in balance?
Sure. Yeah, good question. I'll try my best to answer that. So many of the concepts or dynamics that we are so used to hearing about when we speak about organizations and organizational life and culture, for instance, concepts like collaboration, performance, efficiency, trust, that's becoming kind of a buzzword, or just more routinely used. What else? Speaking up, effectiveness, power balances, all these things. So these are concepts, again, that are used frequently, but these concepts are not at their most fundamental form when we approach an organization. Okay. So to sink down into its fundamental form, it's to go down to basics. And that's what I tried to do with this model and these drives they're fundamental drives that, a combination of them or, certain forms of them give rise to healthy collaboration, healthy trust, effectiveness, engagement, all these things. But, to really kind of tackle the root cause, you have to go to, I think, at this level of human psychology, you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with psychology. Those are the building blocks for good and bad habits that we see in interpersonally within organizations. So that's kind of how, you trace them back to that. And if you work at that level, you don't guarantee, but you increase the chances of, these desirable, company dynamics emerging. If you begin at the base. If not, if you bypass those fundamental pieces, you may end up with results you weren't expecting or weren't desiring in the first place.
Okay. Very interesting, because I'm thinking about the sort of context that brought us here in this place. So we talk about maybe competencies for the future. And combination of knowledge, skills, attitudes, values. And when you mention these really sort of core elemental things, then what's your perception on adults and adult educators developing their competencies needed, let's say, 15 years forward from now, and taking into account also what you mentioned just about these very fundamental things. So what's your take on that? How do we develop ourselves for the future? And what kind of competencies do you see there?
So the model I just described and the drives, my intention with that is more kind of applied. It's to really, just to work with individuals. So applying it to that, very targeted, very specific work. The question you're asking forces me to kind of take a step back and I don't know, just
by all means
take a wider net. So let's go there. All these things are connected, but different sides apply to different kind of questions. So I guess maybe the most important piece that I see that is of particular importance to those who are educating other adults. Okay, let's take a step back. So if you're an adult educator and you're teaching a course, say on, I don't know, give me a topic. What could they be? Innovation, or they're giving a class on innovation, for instance. If I'm an adult educator, I'm teaching a class on innovation, I could go in and teach the material. Mm-hmm. What's maybe in the textbook, or the lesson plan that you and colleagues have put together, and teach them, maybe give them tips on how to, practical tips on how to change their surroundings or their life in some way that could help encourage them to be more innovative or creative. That's fine, but the problem with doing just that is that it overlooks and kind of ignores this whole other side of how people develop. We don't just develop in terms of skills. We develop in terms of our humanness, or as human beings, as people. So let's take an extreme example, just for clarity's sake. When we think of people like who are exemplary moral leaders, for instance, the most common ones, obviously Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela. What do these people have that most of us do not? What is it about them? What is it? Is it a matter of skills? Did they learn these things in courses? No, they have developed something internal that's invisible, and that's why it's so hard to. It's hard to talk about it, to be honest, just because it's invisible. It's intangible, but it's absolutely critical, universal, and I think it's so this inner quality. I think we can speak about it. I call it maturity. It goes by many names, but I think it's going to be the most, or one of the most. I'll say the most. I'll put my eggs in that basket. Yeah, the most valuable or important quality for us to cultivate, I think, in the coming years. Why? Because of the coming uncertainty of the years ahead, for a number of reasons: coronavirus, climate change, AI, revolution, you name it. So maturity, I guess what I'm saying is that maturity is not our defense, but it's our tool to better cope and help others and support others through these times. And again, if we ignore this, then we're missing a great opportunity for adult educators, I'm saying. To not just teach them the skills, but to support them in learning in the new world we are entering into. That makes sense.
Yeah, I just started thinking how to then develop that within me, for example, as an educator. So what can I do to keep on growing and help others in doing this as well? Right.
So, okay.
Not to reveal all your consultational secrets, but
no. I don't think there's any risk of that. This stuff is very complex, and I'll give you a sense of that, and I'll try to answer your question.
Just to maybe make it a bit easier to tangible. Kind of
be more tangible.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, so one of the biggest jumps in maturity that an adult can make is from, and I'm going to use Keegan's model of psychological complexity. One of the greatest jumps, greatest achievements in terms of maturity that an adult can make is moving gradually. This is not overnight. It can take years, decades, for this to make the full transition, but it's from what this he calls the socialized mind to the self-authoring mind. It depends on which model you look at. It will give you a different sense of how many adults have developed this, but it's anywhere from 20 to 40%. It's not a majority of adults, the population who make the full transition. And what does that mean? Well, when you transition from, there are two different ways of knowing, socialized mind and self-authoring. Self-authoring being the more mature version. So basically, someone at self-authoring, it's not that they're inherently better than someone at the socialized mind. They're not a better person, or a person at the socialized mind could be just that, or even more generous, kind, all these qualities of worth and import. But it's that a person at the self-authoring mind is better able to handle complexity. Why? Because their mind is, in a way, their way of seeing the world is more complex. Okay, so what does that mean tangibly? So a person at the socialized mind is caught by and is challenged by by certain things that a person at self-authoring mind is not. In a way, they can transcend the challenges found at the socialized mind. But the person at self-authoring mind has their own set of challenges. Mm-hmm. They're different. Mm-hmm. But anyways, so socialized mind, one of the defining characteristics is, in a way, when it comes time to make an important decision maybe for themselves. For instance, a kid, a young adult deciding to go to college, whether to go to college or whether to go to vocational school, or an adult deciding whether to kind of leave their job or to change careers, mm-hmm. or to stay at their job. So these kinds of decisions, when it comes down to it, what one most needs in order to make a decision like that's ripe with uncertainty, because you don't know what's better, mm-hmm. right? And we all face these really uncertain decisions. Mm-hmm. So what happens? So a person at the socialized mind a person at socialized mind hasn't developed yet their own kind of internal voice, their own internal judge of what's right is not fully developed. So it's weak. It's kind of a weak, softer voice. Maybe the person can't even hear it. There's nothing there, and that's in a way that happens to many of us. We just don't know. We're just dumbfounded. There's no way out. That's what it feels like. So what do we do in a case like that? We go to important others, maybe to respected members of the family, mm-hmm. or our friends, and say, hey, what should I do? What would you do? But in that way, we get support, right? We are supported by others who can kind of guide us. When we don't have the answers ourselves, we can turn to others, and they fill that hole, that vacuum, where our own voice should be, but it hasn't yet reached that point where we can say, okay, I know the answer to this, right? That's what develops that's one of the many things that develops in the transition from socialized to self-authoring. Self-authoring, you become the author of what's right, what's good, what's bad, what's wrong for you, for others. That internal compass, that internal voice, it kind of emerges. And so when you're faced with uncertain decisions, there's a lot of uncertainty, you have an internal resource you can turn to automatically. It just happens almost, I would argue, unconsciously sometimes. It's just there because it's developed. So that's, so again, if you're a person deciding whether or not to change careers, the more developed towards self-authoring you are, the less time you spend in that kind of purgatory, that kind of often painful, place where there's no clear answer. there's no clear way out, and you're at a loss and it's full of doubt. We all go through this. The closer you are to self-authoring, the faster an answer comes from within, and it feels right. You can trust it, and it's easier to trust your own self, your own voice, right? And so just to connect it to this, to the future that we face. I mean, I think this example shows us how greater maturity, can help us manage the uncertainty of the future. I don't know, and I can give, for instance, climate change. How should I prepare? Should I prepare? Should I not? What are other people going to think of me if I go, for just an extreme example, go out and live off grid in the middle of nowhere? Is that the right decision for my family? Should I don't know, COVID-19, should we have everyone here should all of us in our family wear a mask? Should they not? Should we travel? Should we not? I mean, but these are, questions that I think are going to become more and more common, that I think we'll need to turn. I think if we have this internal resource developed, that will help us, I think, manage all of these and many other questions. It's a very long, convoluted answer, I think, but
yeah. And again, in my head, it sort of triggers. Okay, let's continue from here. And, because I'm interested in how would I know, have I reached self-authoring level, that I'm now operating and making decisions, and my mind is working this way. Is there a way, or is that consultants giving me a session of mapping where we are, or is that something that in the future, or more and more now going forward, an adult educator maybe should focus on helping the learners understand better, helping in reflecting on how am I sort of going forward, and learning to learn that kind of aspect more and more. How do you see us, all of us in this scenario, and developing these? Is it something that all of us can achieve if we want to? Go beyond and keep on maturing.
Yes. Yeah. Great questions. Let's see which one I tackle first. So. Okay, you might need to remind me of the second part, but the first part, I mean, how to assess for one's, one's own kind of where one is at. How deep? Well, there are several ways. One super practical way is, conduct, and there are different kind of individuals, experts in this field, and companies who can do what sometimes called as the subject-object interview, for instance. That's a very practical way, and that's applied in the business world and coaching settings. And by the way, this model of adult development is applied by developmental coaches who help senior executives understand this aspect about themselves, and that forms the where one is at, and them coming to terms with that, or learning more about that, it forms the basis for the coaching practice. So there's that, but I mean that's not the only route. I mean, look back. I would suggest look for you. I mean, if you're interested in where you might be, how far you look back at the decisions that you've had to make, or at situations, particularly interpersonal ones, that were difficult for you. Why were they difficult? What was holding you, right? And I mean, that's, again, you would need some, a good level of understanding of developmental theory, particularly these stages, socialized, self-authoring, and the next one, which is self-transforming, just what they look like, what it feels like to be in to be challenged at the different stages. Challenge looks different at each stage. So, yeah, maybe that's not the most practical or easiest way of getting there, but it does take some understanding of this. That's why it's helpful to be with someone who can help, guide. It doesn't have to be a coach or a consultant, just a friend.
Well, let's continue from that. You spoke about executives and sort of leaders in organizations, but are these things too complex for someone else in a say a minor role in an organization, or
No, and that's that's a great question. So to be honest, I think executives nowadays in our world, now the executives are the ones who have the luxury of exploring themselves in this way, because that's who they have the money, the resources to pay for these kinds of programs. But I think that's not right for in the long run. It's not right. Because I think this is a universal aspect of human experience. So we should be able to talk about this, speak about, support each other in this in our mutual growth. Wherever you are, at any institution. I worked in a prison once where my kind of counterpart there was super interested in applying these ideas, these models of development with their staff who looked after the prisoners. Just to help the staff understand the prisoners possibly understand the staff. It does that. It can potentially break down those barriers of understanding, between people.
That's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about educating, and sort of lifelong learning as well. What I'm hearing here quite a lot. And you mentioned earlier that instead of providing these sort of maybe detail level tips or specific tools even, or something really sort of small and to take on, then
that's right.
Is it more that in adult education, for example, we should focus on helping the learners, those adults, being able to go back and reflect on, okay, for example, these decisions, how did I make those, and learn from that, and what are the abilities, competencies that may be lacking and I should go towards and keep on developing. And the adult educator's role is to help in this process. Do you see it this way, or?
Right. So a couple of things. I may kind of address your question tangentially. I'm just gonna move on.
That's great.
So, okay. So let's see. I'm gonna set out the following axiom and see where that takes us. But I feel it's right. So, as an adult educator, if you're educating other adults, you can come in and again just teach from the lesson plan. Teach them the concepts, the ideas of this external subject, whatever it is, innovation, creativity, leadership, etc., etc., etc. But that's something out there. That's something external. So it's like, so if you think of a triangle, the educators on one side, the learners on the other side, and you both are looking outwards to this subject, leadership, creativity. This is how to become a better leader. This is how to be more creative. Let's look at this thing that's, in a way, it's separate from each of us. It's not personal. It's just an objective thing out there. Development, or looking at development and maturity, has us kind of turn towards each other and look at ourselves. And it's somehow, it's in that friction that's what can support growth, human growth, right? It's looking towards each other, facing each other. And I'll say something else. So okay, fine. So we can, teach about this external concept, and you can do that through many different means, right? PowerPoint. I mean, whatever. Video. You can use all types of tools. But how do I guess to engage someone's maturity? That doesn't depend on being read to from a book. I mean, it can. You can tell them about the theory, but that won't help them change themselves. What can help them change themselves is the educator. It's how the educator holds the environment. How the educator holds the learning in that person's place in it. How the educator relates to the learner and challenges them, right? And understands them as individuals. Because maturity, I mean, to support someone's maturity, you first need to know where they are. Mm-hmm. Why? Because when we are at different kind of places or positions on our journey of human growth, we need different things, So depending on where we're going to need different things. So that's why it's important to understand where this person is, so I can best support them. So there's that kind of individualization that needs to be in place, or the educator needs to. So this is a lot of responsibility on the educator. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not just about teaching material, but it's about really engaging with the people individually, and to do that requires a slightly higher degree of maturity to understand that, hey, it's not just this. Teaching the material is not the only way I'm affecting these people. It's how I'm holding it. Even if I'm not aware of how I'm holding it, it's still having an effect. And when we're not aware of its effect, then oftentimes it's not supportive for the learner. Mm-hmm. So you first need to become aware, like, hey, I have an effect. How I speak, how I engage with them, all that thing, all these subtle, invisible things do have effects.
Or it may be supportive, but we don't know that it might be.
It could be supportive, yeah.
That means sort of,
if that person maybe has some natural, qualities that are supportive for growth, but the opposite could also be true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ooh, sounds like a big thing to do. Again, going back to how could I hold my group of learners in a best way? Yeah. And is that I need to first have the experience, sort of develop these abilities in me, right? In order to do that, right? Or should I take a course in psychology and then go deeper? Or what's the way for me to?
Look, it's interesting. Life, in a way, is its own classroom. I think, and life has its own way of teaching us and moving us along the path. Again, some of us, it moves slower than others, but it does move us over time, So things that happen over the course of one's life, certain events, can trigger our own development. So what I'm saying is that you don't have to just think, if I don't take, X course, or if I don't study with this person or that person, I'm going to miss out on all this. Mm-hmm. No, life teaches us these things. So for instance, the death of a loved one, the birth of a child, a traumatic experience in adulthood, a near-death experience. I mean, these are extremes, but these can activate and accelerate our own growth, dealing with these very complex situations. In reality, it's the micro moments, micro challenges in your relationship with your partner, with a colleague at work, and how you resolve that, how you hold them, how you hold that space with them. And how you hold yourself in that space. So all these micro moments are potentially transformative, opportunities. Mm-hmm. But again, I think it's very helpful to first understand that, hey, this growth thing, I can be doing it all the time. and it doesn't end, which supports this argument of lifelong learning.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, what is does lifelong learning mean just learning one skill after another ad nauseum until one's death? No, I don't think that's what it means. I think it's referring to, and this is just my view. Maybe you have a different view, but lifelong learning, I think it speaks to this, or it intends to speak to this quality of, kind of human unfolding, how we develop as human beings, not as innovators per se. Yeah.
Wow.
Are we doing on time?
We have hopefully for a couple of more. I really enjoyed this.
I may have a bit more time, maybe till 11:15.
Yeah, something like 10 minutes or
10-15. Yeah.
Whew. I want to ask, how do you see nowadays education supporting the lifelong learning, and if you see something that should be changed, what is that when we look again to the future and how to support this?
Right.
Maybe if you want, you can go to childhood and what are the important things there, and as we grow older, mature,
right,
and is there differences there, and how to
in childhood? So yes, can you say a little more the connection?
Well, when we think about our educational system,
right,
we start from quite early, in Finland, 6-7 year old,
right,
even in kindergarten and so on and so on. So in terms of what we've been talking about here, and it might be that as a child,
right,
you still don't have, or you're developing these competencies in, may that be knowing yourself, and that happens more in the teenage years, and then you move from there. But just the holding part, and what could we do in education, maybe in a better way, when going
okay, got it. Yep. So let me try to tackle this on two levels. So one is in a more kind of basic, but maybe more easily accessible, or I don't want to say understandable, but it's just a more basic level, which is really super important. And then I'll get a little bit deeper into the more complex ways that we can hold this. So the more basic level is in terms of holding this not a paradox, but it's these holding a balance. So and the balance is between challenge and support. So first, as just a first step, and maybe one of the most basic and critical steps of understanding human growth is to understand that we need two ingredients. We need to be challenged and we need to be supported. Too much challenge will burn us out. We'll drown. I was going to say we won't regress, but we will maybe be stunted. Our development will stop. Why? Because we need to focus on maybe our own, survival, or managing certain threats that that are overbearing, overwhelming us. So we can't engage with our own development if there's too much challenge. And I would argue that in most contexts in our society, in the world we live in, that's where it falters. There's just too much challenge. The other ingredient is support. So in all aspects of life, and I think this one of the failings of our kind of collective understanding of adulthood is that we are fully entirely self-sufficient. We don't need any help. We don't need any support. We become our own support, and that's it. I don't think that's helpful. So we need different forms of support. So I'll say this: the forms of support that we need throughout our lives, which we do, we always need external and internal, I would argue, these change as we get older. So as a child, it may just, the support could come from your parents, maybe from friends. As you get older, yes, maybe family, but you might, kind of distance yourself from them ideologically or physically or whatever, which makes that support untenable. But other forms of support could be some kind of mentor as an adult, having a mentor, someone older, someone more mature than you are, to help hold you, to give you support in challenging life situations. In our society, therapists sometimes take that role. It doesn't have to be one. Coaches can take that role. It could just be a really good friend who can speak to you with both honesty and with care, right? So anyways, so support. So again, this is the basic principle. As a child, we need challenge support. I'll tell you what that looks like. I have a 3-year-old son. He was almost 3, and I was with him at the pool the other day. And I was reflecting during that time and afterwards, okay, how can I do both with him? How can I apply both a sense of challenge and a sense of being supported in learning how to swim or learning how to be in the water? And, and one of them is to simply just let him be by himself in about, I don't know, half a meter of water or a little bit more. I mean, if he falls, and he did a few times, he fell, he tripped, and he fell. He can't swim, so he sunk, and he took in some water. But I was there immediately to lift him up, right? So there's a sense of challenge, sense of risk, but not to the point that it will overwhelm him. I'm always there, and I let him know, I'm always here for you. I'm not turning I'm not going to look anywhere else. I'm here, focused on you. Nothing's going to happen. I've got you. But it's up to you now. See what this is like. Feel, just being in the water. So it's that balance. And what's the result? He loves it. He keeps wanting to go back to the pool and experience it more. And but again, this is a microcosm.
And gradually he'll learn to cope himself there, and doesn't need you being around all the time.
Exactly. And there are ways that I can do either, I can apply too much of either ingredient. I can be over supportive, always holding him so he doesn't fall. That won't stimulate his own development. I can be very challenging, like my father was. Hope he doesn't watch this. But he just threw me in the pool when I was little. And I still remember that, 30 whatever years later.
But you learned to swim.
Not then.
Yeah.
I think I don't think that helped much.
Yeah.
And not only did it not help, I had to learn many years later how to swim with someone else but it's an image, it's a memory that I have of my father just throwing me in the water, and it's like, dude, really? I mean, I think about it now with my son. I'm like, I can't. I don't think that's the right way. That's too much challenge.
Okay. So for an educator, again, going back to this, may that be the course of innovation, not to throw in the people without, being present and supporting them.
That's right.
But then not to be there holding hand all the time.
Yeah.
And sort of,
It's the balance.
Yeah.
And knowing what that balance looks like is, that should be, I think, a top priority. Knowing how to balance that, what it looks like in the classroom, what it looks like, with different learners. But that, once you find that kind of a sweet spot, I think that's, it's really important.
Could there a mentor or someone else help, let's say, an educator?
Yes.
To better understand how I'm doing these things and help in.
Absolutely.
Or a peer educator, someone else to.
Absolutely. A mentor who's not just that they're, let's see. Yeah, I guess a mentor who can more easily or, has more experience with identifying this intangible, hidden dynamics between learners and educators. To help guide the educator and say, hey, look, you may not see this, and that's okay. That's what I'm here for. But there's this dynamic that you are building, and this is what it seems to be leading to. What do you think? And let them kind of, give their input, and slowly, in a way, the mentor is helping them build a bridge from their understanding now to kind of a deeper understanding of this experience.
Wow.
How much time do we have?
Just maybe at least one more minute to.
Sure.
It could be a yes or no question. I think it's somewhere in between. My hypothesis here.
Sure.
So, doing this face to face or online.
Yeah.
Are these things possible to give space and help and support learners online as well, as in face to face, or how do you see in the future what could be a good model of facilitating this kind of maturing or growth or learning?
So I don't have a clear answer for that. Just because, I know of numerous examples where people are supported in this way virtually. You could have someone could have virtual sessions with a mentor, with a therapist, with someone who can help hold them, while they're facing many of life's challenges. So that can be effective. Is face-to-face more effective? I think I'm pretty confident that it is. Just because that's the way we've evolved as human beings, to be in close contact with each other. This virtual setting. We're doing it. We're engaging with each other virtually all the time, and we're developing that capacity to do that. But we're still in very early stages. So I would argue that in person is most likely optimal. But again, I'm not 100% confident that that's the case. In my opinion, may change, but that's where I stand at the moment.
And do you see this for, let's say, back to humans, something that you'll keep on developing? Also, let's say some parts of it will be happening virtually, or? I think So I think they'll have to, given just the times we're in, with coronavirus. So I have no choice, but I guess I am encouraged by the fact that I know that it can work in this way. Will it be less effective? Possibly than in person, but it won't fully eliminate its effectiveness. It's going to reduce it a bit, possibly. I think so. But that's just a reality. I think I need to deal with, practically. As a final remark, are there from your side any hints where we could look at if we want to learn more about, let's say, not maybe what Keegan and other psychologists have done, but in connection with having these things happening virtually? Are there any good cases done already? Have you come across anything that somewhere in universities or other places or in companies they sort of changed their ways of having these things online? Or is that still coming, or is there somewhere we could look more and study?
It's a good question. Let's see, what can I tell you? I remember looking into this a while ago for just business related questions that were coming up for me, but I remember the clearest piece of research that I found pertained to therapists, and whether therapeutic outcomes, so how effective the therapy was, differed for people meeting their therapist in person or offline. I couldn't find at the time anything done with organizations or coaching or other contexts. So it was therapy, but I think it's still applicable. And the conclusion was that the outcomes, how effective therapy was, didn't differ. So clients experienced similar outcomes, similar level of effectiveness from the therapy, and I think it was all self-reported. The person was, they had to score themselves on how much improvement or how helpful it was, and it was very similar, I think, for both groups. So, I mean, that's the clearest piece of research, but there's probably more out there at this point.
Okay. Well, we'll take that as a hope.
One last thing that's coming to mind, and just as an example, and I think it's one that I can speak to personally about. So, when we were speaking about educators and how it's not just the material that they are responsible for conveying to the learners, but again, the intangible, the hidden side of interpersonal interaction that's equally or more important, I would say. I just want to give an example of what that looks like in a business context. So one of my responsibilities as a culture consultant is to present the results of culture assessments to the leadership team, the executive board, and companies. And, so imagine maybe I'm on a Zoom call with them, or maybe I'm there in person presenting the results. And I could very easily, as I think many of us do, present what's on the slides. And I could tell them, look, these are our findings, these are our recommendations, here's where we're at. This is what your culture looks like based on our assessment. A different, more complex way of engaging with that experience is to somehow mirror the culture that you experienced personally in the moment with them. Maybe that would involve me speaking about an experience I had in setting up the culture assessment with my contact in the company. Say, look, this is what it was like for me interacting with your staff. This is how I experienced it. What is that like for you when I tell you about this? And have them reflect on it in real time, right? So in a way that engages them very directly, rather than just something out there. These are the results. It's like, look, this was my experience. How does that sound? I mean, what do you make of that? And engage with them. I mean, of course, these things are more difficult to do, but I think it increases the chances of kind of a real transformation happening in the moment, right? So it's a different way of holding the context. I can still present all this. It's not that it's not either or. It's this, but then also acknowledging, look, there's something hidden here that can be revealed. And it's about finding ways of doing that, in ways that they're supportive for them, in ways that are skillful, that they can receive and engage with. And that's a challenge, but it's that's a path, I think, to touch into all these different dimensions we've been speaking about.
Yeah. I already took that and kind of started challenging myself when going into coaching again, and the way you were describing engaging in a business context, but similar aspects in when it comes to learning or developing something. Right. So thank you for this.
Welcome.
And thank you in general, I'd say.
You're welcome. Pleasure, man.